Greetings to the Galactic Council. As an archivist and mud pilot for the Hologram, I'd like to share with you an excerpt from the diary of Mediar and Evan Woolif, cartographer and explorer. Unknown faction, origin unknown. Expedition Day 314. Vessel ID Ogrica. Location Sogmian Sector. Much like some of Earth's former prominent religious texts, the following is a work of fragments rather than a whole. Much of this diary entry has been translated, interpreted, and regrettably tampered with in order to paint a more coherent picture, though its narrative remains as close to unchanged as one might dare to hope. In speaking of hope, I urge the reader to pass this transcription on, as I have done, so that those seeking to part the fog of mystery surrounding the Star Atlas may begin to unravel its secrets, one thread at a time. Long have I cultivated the so-called explorer's instinct. Many times has it called me further into the void of space. My fuel stocked stretched pitifully thin, but my hunger for discovery pulling me onward through peril or peace, like a great lurching magnet. Many times I salvaged great rewards, despite or because of the treacherous paths I had taken to find them. The Favrik bounty hunters, with their ships wrought of the bones of a commander vessel, have hunted me through the four systems. Hoping in vain to loot my dead corpse of the Atlas map I procured from the Picciorati. Mud agents pleaded and offered bargains for the mere trace of iridicide I had managed to mine from the Cataclysm outer sector. When I turned down their offers, they sent rogue operatives after my head. Countless dangers have passed by me like the near-miss tracer rounds, but so long as my instinct has guided me onward, I have emerged unscathed, luckier and richer still. I fear that I should now abandon this instinct, for it has delivered me from the greatest danger of all, deep, truthful knowledge. Today's discovery has made quite clear that old tired adage, be careful what you wish for. The morning began much like the last 100, save for a timely encounter. The smooth, cold slab wrought of stone I called a bed vibrated ever so slightly, and as I opened my eyes, the outer shutters on the observation deck slid open to reveal infinite blackness, peppered with glinting white dots, save for one dot to the far left of my vision, which was larger than the others and pulsed subtly from violet to pink. Precious little Vahav, the orphan moon, the Sogmian jewel. Only a morning's flight from where my shimmer floated in the silence and stealth. I disengaged the Ogrica's cloak form and turned her slim, bullet-like shape in the direction of the Vahav. Her engine purred, and I smiled, mostly relieved that the fuel stocks were, for once, at a respectable halfway point. The space near Vahav was vacuous. Only my ship and the odd moon rock circled around her dark form. The nearest star shone like a distant firefly, casting a cold blue light that barely lit the moon's brighter half. I continued to orbit wearily, waiting for my instinct to play its little tune, but only the comms hissed their usual white noise and the radar beeped unimpressively. Before I could place a finger on the pilot's controls, something shifted the symmetry of my vision, blurring everything into double. The spark of a comet in my periphery, perhaps? The flash of a rogue tracer around Vahav below? Just as quickly, my sight returned to normal. It was so sudden, so subtle, that I couldn't rule out that it may have simply been a symptom of fatigue. I am, if anything, a horrible light sleeper. From a compartment beneath the flight control system, I retrieved an unused metascape, twisting its tubular shell once so that it clicked. A mechanism beneath the casing hummed, and the words self-scan appeared on a tiny screen embedded into the instrument's handle. I tapped the screen gently and raised the metascape to my temple, hearing it burr and click. After a moment, the metascape went silent, and the little screen's text read vitals normal. Not me, then. Worry, usually a stranger to me, began to make itself all too welcome somewhere in the back of my mind. As if to answer my growing dread, the thing came a second time. A vague twinkling of light shot across my vision, blurring its contents. Only this time a sudden headache followed in its wake. Pain seared between my temples. I shut my eyes tightly, hoping to somehow wring my head into clarity. When I finally opened them again, Vahav loomed vast and empty below, and the stars glinted gloomily, but clearly in the distance. No migraine. No strange flashes behind my eyes. I waited an hour in meditative silence. watching the light spread impossibly vast shadows along the lonely moon's surface. When I was beyond any doubt that my vision was intact and my head clear, I let Shimmer fall gently below the exosphere. Dark red clouds parted like sea foam as my ship raced towards the surface of Vahav. As the fog thinned, I could make out immense, cloven mountains rising from the moon's cracked surface. Tall, narrow spires, black as iron, jutted out of every rock face like thorns. Dark blue creeper plants snaked in between the spires, vining upward from the earth to the peaks of the Sawtooth Mountains, where they disappear between heavy red mists. The dusky blue light helped little in finding somewhere to land. Never mind the abyss of shadows cast by the spiny horizon. I slowed Shimmer down, gritting my teeth as the ship's low globe struggled to illuminate any kind of safe passage. I blinked up at the nav queue screen atop the cockpit, its soundless display staring dumbly at me, a red vacant. I had never entered a moon or planet where my own tech didn't pick up at least one docking station, but here it was. Absolute radio silence, as my old man used to say. Luck is blinking light away, he used to say too. Even the furthest star reflects a drop of dew. The old man was full of sentiment. I guessed I was only half a league from the surface, hovering delicately amidst the mountain's many teeth, when a white light flickered mercifully somewhere in the blackness below. It blinked again, and this time Shimmer was close enough that I could make out a stretch of open plain, empty and scarless. My nav-Q had the good sense to trace the photon trail left by the lonely light, mapping out an appropriate descent. I thanked the Onai earnestly for their clever tinkering as the ship's thrusters tilted vertically and she hovered down to relative safety. Shimmer made a gentle clunk as she settled in the clearing. As soon as the cockpit door slid open, the immense pressure of Vahav's airspace caused a frenzied stir in my chest. I held my breath until the familiar hiss of my grip suit meant power had been initiated, oxygen supplied, and gravity righted. I exhaled slowly, relieved. The suit was an old model, no doubt, stuck behind a retrograde programming error that meant it only activated when an absence of natural breathing air was detected. But the sturdy lightweight fabric was hard to come by, and it served me on every spaceflight taken since I piloted Shimmer. I stepped out into the silent expanse, the eerie dusk interrupted only by the guiding light blinking beside my ship. The silhouettes of the surrounding ridgeline reached up like monstrous claws, snatching at the faint light. I punched a button beneath the cockpit and my trusty microdrone slid from its hidden compartment, its tiny wings extending into a star shape as it rose 10 feet above me. It scanned the area and beeped sadly when it found nothing of note, though a small infrared light beamed from its tiny hole, giving this explorer's eyes some much-needed illumination. I knelt down beside Shimmer and swept violet sand from the blinking light. It was embedded into something metal, cold and smooth. It didn't take much more unearthing to make out the frame of a large, shining hatch woven in the bedrock. It shone with an unusual polish for something so buried and remote. My reflection cast back at me along its glimmering surface. It dawned on me that my instinct had grown cold, and despite my grip suit's insulation, so had I. A hatch in the sand moment would have usually filled me with wonder and grit, though strangely, I felt only a kind of emptiness. The tired path beaten, perhaps? I straightened up, scanning the dimly lit opening. I noticed suddenly that the vine-like plants that scaled the mountains, dark tendril things that they were in fact moving. Near the edge of the clearing, I could make out 3 or 4 of their impossibly long strands, slinking rapidly alongside the ridgeline. Some were coiled, others were taut like girders, all moving along serpent-like. This is where many may find their skin crawling, but it seems fascination had often outweighed caution in my foolish head. In fact, the sight of another life form seemed to summon forth some type of vigor that had left me before, and I bristled with renewed energy. Instinct or luck, I wasn't entirely sure, but something tugged at my guts and I leaned over the hatch again, resolved to unearth its mystery. As if in response to my renewed spirit, the white light ebbed to a warm orange. I froze, staring with wide, nervous eyes. My microdrone backed up and beeped twice, its nose tilting to scan the hatch. Without warning, the drone's miniature wings retracted into its roof and it plummeted to the ground, landing with a loud clink. It twitched once before its status gauge went blank. I stretched out my hands to snatch the drone when a faint rustling sounded beneath the hatch. a narrow slit suddenly appeared in the large metal frame, and I stumbled backwards, barely managing to catch my footing. A cascade of dust and fog seeped from the gap, the whole frame grinding and whirring as its metal face split asunder, revealing distinct doors that retracted noisily into the bedrock. Sand and stone slid towards the opening, and I gasped helplessly as my microdrone was swept along, tumbling down into the hatch where it clattered a moment later, somewhere in the darkness below. I swallowed, pulsing with adrenaline, then let out an inadvertent chuckle. The chuckle rose to almost a manic cackle, so much so that I grabbed my belly and went to wipe away my tears despite my grip mask. Decades of exploration did funny things to a mind, even when the danger was at its closest and caution needed heeding, especially so perhaps. After my nervous laughter abated, I stood up and glared wearily down the large, square-shaped hole. The dim dusk light had waned so much that even the minute green lights on my grip suit seemed to do a better job of illuminating the cavernous expanse. Something glinted in the dark, probably the drone, though I couldn't be sure. I retrieved my tech light, the trusty K-flare that I kept stashed in my grip suit. It looked remarkably new, despite its long tenure. Inching towards the opening, ever so careful not to fall in myself, I let the tech light drop from my outstretched hand down the hatch. The squat, ovular device stopped its descent halfway down, hovering in midair like a ghostly moon rock. It hissed and burst into a dazzling teal light. Shadows sprang from sharp right angles as the tech light flared across the large room, beaming against metallic floors and walls. Broken ship parts lay sprawled about like a ransacked scrapyard, the rusted shells glinting dully in the artificial light. My microdrone lay near the center, still as a statue. Beside it, a weathered and primitive ladder climbed upward toward the entrance, arriving neatly at the lip of the hatch just below my feet. I turned around to offer a furtive glance at Shimmer. It paid me to leave the ship unwatched. In expeditions past, I would often leave my microdrone to patrol her perimeter, its uplink reassuringly connected to my grip suit, whilst I ventured forward into whatever unknown. But the grip suit's small camera feed showed a blank screen, the connection severed since the drone tumbled down the hatch. Instinct or no, the microdrone was priceless, indispensable tech, and I couldn't just leave it in the darkness. Like my father, I carried my own sentiments. Though it creaked and squeaked with age, the ladder held firm as it descended down the hatch. Stopping, checking each run for unseen, rusty protrusions that might puncture my grip gloves. I leapt from the last rung, gloves and boots intact, and landed on the graded, hard ground beside the downed microdrone. The tech light's flare was just beginning to fade, but it shone enough to show the thumb-sized dent in the drone's hull, though its wings seemed to have retracted safely into its roof. I picked it up delicately, rotating a strangely light form in my hands, searching for the source of sudden shutdown. Just as the teal light from the fading flare had all but dwindled into blackness, the microdrone buzzed faintly in my hands. Then, without any preamble, it lurched upward towards the ceiling, its small lights streaking as it looped above my head in a wide arc. I found a laugh creep its way up from my belly, followed by a little flood of relief down my chest. Before I could relish any more of the drone's apparent resurrection, it zipped off towards the far side of the large room, a slalom of shifting shadows stretching before it. As it reached the far wall, infrared blinked to life from its hole, casting a luminous white-blue on the section of the wall. Strange glyphs glittered there, their shapes twisting elegantly to form what looked like script. I moved across the room, stepping in between stripped casings, ammunition rounds, impulse engines, all disassembled and strewn in random heaps. The microdrone beeped twice as I approached the wall, running my hand along its smooth surface and glanced up towards the glyphs. Beneath the infrared, they almost shone like gold. "I wonder who wrote this," I said aloud, as my voice bounced about the room with ghostly separation. A great clink sounded behind the wall, and I felt like the whole thing rattled violently beneath my still outstretched hand. Dust seemed to cough from behind it, shooting up in great spurts from every minor crack and cut in the surface. The microdrone whizzed away, making a coy cooing sound as I hurtled back myself. With an ear-splitting crack, the entire wall began to shift towards me, as if one side of an enormous compactor had begun its slow, crushing onslaught to flatten the room's contents, myself included. Gasping, I stood up and whirled around, ready to launch towards the ladder where the microdrone now anxiously flittered. Before I strode 3 paces, the great grinding of the wall went suddenly still. I braved a turn to see that the entire metallic surface had inched only a few feet forward. though where the drone had found the shining glyphs now stretched a small opening in the wall, large enough for a short man to waddle through. The micro-drone had the good sense to hover behind me, protected by my squat body as I hobbled through the wall's opening into pitch black. The tunnel was mercifully short, and I soon found my feet touching gravelly earth, my hands reaching out blindly. The drone shot over my head into a clearing, scanning, clicking, beeping, as it was swallowed by the darkness. I was about to call out to it when it zoomed back towards me and chirped. Its light turned to face a narrow walkway in the bare earth that led into the darkness. As I trudged along the path, the drone rose above me, lighting up the cavernous expanse. I stared in wonder. This wasn't a cavern, it was a hangar. Further along the path, a small, angular ship hung eerily in the air. And though it better resembled a smooth black slab, I could tell exactly what it was by the long, straight etchings across the body that glowed with a faint yellow. A rainbow Om. A doorway ominously bright stood open near its rear. The path seemed to stretch towards it. Something flickered there, amidst the blinding white entrance. Though the usual jump my heart did when danger was in the air did not occur, my feet led me onwards, compelled by bravery I did not feel. I was near the entrance, my drone following closely, carefully behind, when the sudden pounding caught me between the eyes. A retching, blinding migraine. I crumpled to the floor, breathing in harshly and clutching at my beating temples. "Peace, Mediar," said a voice in my head softly. Not my voice. My lips trembled as fear started bubbling in my chest. "Peace. You are not losing your mind, explorer," the voice said again, a gentle touch of humor in the words. I clapped on my head hard, hoping to rattle this sudden madness out of it. "I said peace," the voice bellowed, and my headache disappeared. I opened my eyes, but no stranger stood before me. I had begun to think it was all some hallucination, that perhaps I had hit my head, and this was all some concussion dream, when the stranger spoke again. "Mediar, that is your name, is it not? An explorer, one who cannot resist the call," boomed the voice, and the rainbow suddenly shimmered, a great silver streak of light pulsing along its smooth surface. "Enter then, hunter of history. My gallery is yours to pursue, and the dark knowledge there is your burden to bear if you are worthy. If not, well, there will be others," said the voice. "Who are you?" I stammered, shock still fresh in my limbs and face. "I am of Turka. I am of Fatoli Soothsayer, the last one. And you, Mediar and Ebn Wulif, you will be my body," the voice said resoundingly, though no echo could be heard in the cavern. A warm feeling fluttered in the pit of my stomach. It rose, rather pleasant, tickling behind my chest, soothing the anxious knots in my throat. It seeped through my jaw, my tongue and my lips, breathing delicious warmth throughout my skull. This sense of me, the eternal I behind my eyes, seemed to be vanishing. Traces of my ego clung to my psyche, but it was no use. Thoughts of the past, hopes of the future were swallowed by a great vacuum that was all around me, within me. My body floated toward the Om's entrance, where it was engulfed in a strange white mist. I faded with the light. When I awoke, the tassels of my mind had been strewn about, reconfigured. Something seemed out of place. However, I was certain of one thing. Mediar had left. I knew not who I was, but I could recall one name. Fatoli.